Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep into process improvement. I know you've been asking for this one. It's a topic near and dear to your hearts, I can tell. And you've sent some really interesting stuff our way to get us started. Really looking forward to unpacking all of it with our expert here. We're going to be tackling those pesky performance issues that pop up in organizations. You know, going beyond all the buzzwords to figure out what really works and when to use it.
And sometimes even looking at what we thought worked and realizing, well, maybe it wasn't as great as we thought it was.
That's a really great point. One of the sources you sent, the Enterprise Process Performance Improvement Model by Guy W. Wallace, really jumped out at me. He starts by, well, he basically throws down the gauntlet right from the get-go. He questions the effectiveness of Six Sigma. Did you know that 53 out of 58 large companies using Six Sigma have actually fallen behind the S&P 500? Since implementing it, I mean. Makes you think, is Six Sigma really all it's cracked up to be?
It's definitely an interesting point he raises. While Six Sigma can be very valuable, it's not a magic bullet. It's great for optimizing stable processes that are, repeatable, like think manufacturing, right? But when you try to apply it to these super complex dynamic systems where things are changing all the time, it might not be the best fit. Think of it this way. Six Sigma is like a really, really precise instrument, perfect for fine-tuning a well-oiled machine. But it's not going to be as effective when you're dealing with something that's constantly changing and evolving.
I love that analogy, a constantly evolving organism. So if Six Sigma is not always the answer, what does Wallace propose instead?
Well, he lays out his own model, the Enterprise Process Performance Improvement Model. He describes it as a three-legged stool.
Okay, a three-legged stool. I'm listening. What are the three legs here?
Each leg represents a key element: processes, human assets, and environmental assets. Imagine each one as a crucial support, holding up the overall performance of the system.
Got it. Thinking about those three legs reminds me of something. The Ishikawa diagram, sometimes called the fishbone diagram.
Right on. You got it. And just like the Ishikawa diagram helps you find the root causes of a problem, Wallace's three-legged stool encourages you to look deeper, to consider all the factors that are affecting performance.
You're not just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms, you're going after the root cause. Perfect for our listeners who want to make real, lasting change. Let's talk processes themselves for a moment. Wallace seems to acknowledge that in the real world, processes can get, well, kind of messy.
Absolutely. Processes are not always nice and neat and linear. Some are routine, others are on demand, some are straightforward, and then there are those that are, well, downright convoluted.
To illustrate this, he gives this totally unexpected example. He talks about the process of developing Saturday Night Live scripts. Who would think a show known for its spontaneity, flying by the seat of their pants, has a super controlled process?
Right, you wouldn't expect it. But that's exactly Wallace's point. SNL actually uses what's called structured improvisation. They've got a framework, some guidelines, but within that structure, there's tons of room for creativity and improvisation.
So it's not about stifling creativity with rigid processes, but about, finding that sweet spot, that balance between structure and flexibility.
Yeah.
Now, I'm starting to see how this applies to organizations, too. You can't just force the same approach on every situation, can you?
Nope. Different processes need different levels of control. It all comes down to understanding the context and adapting accordingly.
All right, so we've got these three legs: processes, human assets, and environmental assets. But there's another layer here, right? Stakeholders. Who are they, and why are they so important?
Stakeholders are anyone who has a vested interest in the process and its outcomes. Customers, for sure, but also management, executives, owners, even the government in some cases.
Wow, quite a group.
Yeah.
I imagine their needs and expectations don't always line up perfectly. How do you handle that complexity?
That's where things get tricky. Wallace is big on emphasizing the hierarchy of stakeholder requirements. You got to understand the needs of each group and find a way to balance those sometimes competing interests.
So it's not just about making the customer happy, but finding solutions that work for everyone involved. But wait, what about that saying, the customer is always right? You hear that everywhere.
It's a common one, for sure. But Wallace actually pushes back on that whole customer is king mentality. Customer needs are important, absolutely, but he argues that they shouldn't be the only driving force behind every decision.
I can see how that might ruffle some feathers, but it makes sense. Sometimes there are other factors that, well, they have to come first. Things like legal requirements, ethical considerations. Sometimes you have to make the tough call, even if it means the customer might be unhappy in the short term.
You got it. It's about looking at the bigger picture, making choices that are good for the whole organization for the long haul.
This is all really insightful. I'm eager to hear more about these human and environmental assets and how they fit into the whole process improvement picture. But let's save that for the next part of our deep dive.
It really is fascinating, how Wallace encourages a more holistic approach to process improvement. It's not just about blindly following some method. It's about understanding the nuances, the context, and then adapting your approach.
Totally. It's like he's saying, hey, don't just get fixated on the process itself. Think about the people, the whole system surrounding it. So let's say you're facing a performance issue, right, in your organization. Where do you even start with this three-legged stool idea?
Well, the best place to start is to really nail down the problem, to define it clearly. Ask yourself, what are the specific symptoms I'm seeing? What are we actually trying to achieve here? Once you've got a handle on the issue, then you can start mapping out the process. Think of it like, a detective working a case. Got to gather all the clues before jumping to conclusions.
So you're literally drawing it out, the steps involved. Like a flowchart almost.
Exactly. And as you're visually mapping it out, think about those human and environmental assets at each step. For example, what kind of skills do people need to do their jobs well? What knowledge? What tools and resources do they need? Are there any obstacles in the environment that are getting in the way of their performance?
Those visuals from Wallace's model, the ones you sent over, they'd be super helpful here, wouldn't they? Those diagrams with the different types of assets, they'd be like a checklist, making sure you're not missing anything important.
Definitely. They give you a structure for your analysis, especially when you're just getting started with this framework. By looking at each step systematically and the enablers that go with it, you can start to pinpoint potential gaps or weaknesses.
I bet as you go through this, you'll see some patterns start to emerge. Maybe there's a particular step where things always seem to go wrong, or maybe there's a lack of training in a certain area or support for the employees.
Exactly. The model helps you zero in on the areas where your improvement efforts are needed most. Instead of just randomly trying different solutions, you can focus your energy where it'll have the biggest impact.
Okay, so we've identified the problem areas. What's next? How do we start finding solutions?
That's where things get really creative. Maybe it involves redesigning a part of the process, or maybe it's about providing more training or implementing new tech, or even, rethinking the physical workspace. The key is to be open, to explore all sorts of solutions, and then choose the ones that really target those root causes you've identified.
Makes total sense. But what about the stakeholders we talked about earlier? How do they fit into this whole process? We can't just forget about them and their different interests, can we?
You're absolutely right, we can't. Keep them in mind as you're analyzing the problem and coming up with solutions. Think about how each group will be affected by the proposed changes. Are there any potential conflicts, trade-offs that need to be addressed?
Sounds like a tough balancing act, Trying to meet everyone's needs while still making sure the process achieves what it's supposed to achieve.
It can be, yeah. That's why clear communication is so crucial throughout this whole process improvement journey. Everyone needs to be on the same page, understanding the goals, the challenges, and the proposed solutions.
And that includes being open to feedback, right? I mean, different stakeholders might have perspectives, insights that you haven't even thought of.
Exactly. The more input you gather, the better decisions you'll be able to make. Process improvement is a team effort, after all.
What really strikes me about Wallace's approach is his focus on context. He keeps reminding us that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Absolutely. That's one of the most valuable lessons. It makes you think critically about the situation you're dealing with, right? And then tailor your approach accordingly. It's not about following a recipe step by step, but about adapting the ingredients to make something unique, something, delicious.
Love that. It's about understanding the principles, but not being afraid to play around a bit, experiment, adjust based on what's going on. He even goes as far as questioning the whole customer is king philosophy, which I thought was pretty bold.
He does, yeah. And it's not that he's saying customer needs don't matter. It's more that they shouldn't always be the only factor in every decision. There are times when other things have to come first. Legal stuff, ethical considerations, even the long-term sustainability of the company,
Like the customer is a valued guest, for sure, but not necessarily the one calling all the shots.
Right. It's about finding that balance, meeting customer needs, but also upholding your own values and responsibilities. It takes strong leadership, for sure, and a clear vision to make those tough calls when you need to.
Okay, so we've got the three-legged stool, the stakeholders, the need for, a tailored approach. But there's another piece here, something else Wallace brings up, this interconnectedness between processes, human assets, and environmental assets.
Right. He really emphasizes that these three elements, they aren't just separate things. They constantly interact, influence each other, like a beautifully choreographed dance.
So you can't just optimize each one on its own. You have to think about how they work together as a whole system.
Exactly. Imagine, a team that's super skilled and motivated, but they don't have the tools they need. Their performance is going to suffer no matter how talented they are. Or think about a process that's perfectly streamlined, but the people doing it don't understand why it's important. You're not going to get the best results, even if the process looks perfect on paper.
It's like a delicate ecosystem, isn't it? All the parts have to work in harmony to thrive.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have a holistic view, to see the whole picture when you're tackling process improvement. Don't get stuck on just the individual pieces.
And that's where those, what did he call them? Those enterprise systems come in, the ones that support both human and environmental assets kind of behind the scenes. Those often get overlooked.
You got it. Those systems provide the infrastructure, the foundation for everything else. Things like training programs, performance management systems, communication channels, the technology platforms, even the physical workspaces.
Like the crew behind the scenes on a movie set.
Yeah.
Making sure everything runs smoothly, that the actors can, give their best performance.
Perfect analogy. And just like a well-oiled machine, these systems need to be maintained, kept up to date. Especially with technology changing so fast, organizations got to be agile, adaptable.
It feels like process improvement is more of a marathon, not a sprint. A constant cycle of evaluating, improving, adapting.
You nailed it.
Oh.
That's what makes it so dynamic, so engaging. There's always something new to learn, new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference.
You're clearly passionate about this. It's not just about efficiency, is it? It's about making a real difference, making things better, a more positive environment.
Absolutely. And the really exciting thing is that, with the right tools, the right frameworks, we can do just that.
Wallace's model, the one we're talking about, it gives you that solid foundation. It helps you understand the complexities and then come up with an approach that actually works for your situation. It's like a compass, guiding you through uncharted territory. But it's not enough to just memorize the model. It's about taking those principles and applying them thoughtfully.
Absolutely. Think of it as a roadmap, a guide for your own unique journey. And remember, you're not alone. There are tons of resources out there, people who are just as passionate about this, ready to help you succeed.
That's great to hear. So as you embark on this journey, don't be afraid to, experiment, try new things, and don't worry about making mistakes. It's all part of the process.
It is. Process improvement is a journey, a process in itself. The more you practice, the better you'll get at navigating it.
So embrace the challenge, keep learning, never stop trying to improve. Because in the end, it's not just about, optimizing processes. It's about creating a better future for your organization and for the people in it.
Beautifully said. Making work more meaningful, more engaging, more fulfilling for everyone.
Speaking of making things more engaging, let's take a closer look at those human and environmental enablers. That's next in the final part of our deep dive. It's interesting that term Wallace uses, enablers, when he's talking about human and environmental assets. It's not just about the process itself, right? It's about creating a whole environment where people can thrive, do their best work. What are some examples of those human asset enablers, the ones companies should really focus on?
Well, it all starts with skills and knowledge. Organizations, they need to invest in training, development programs that give their employees the expertise they need to be successful in their roles.
It's not just technical skills these days, is it? What else is becoming more and more important, especially for, process improvement?
You're right. It goes way beyond just technical stuff. You got to cultivate those soft skills too. Communication, problem solving, teamwork. Those are becoming super valuable, especially as companies move toward more collaborative, interconnected ways of working.
Teamwork makes the dream work. But even with the right skills, the willingness to collaborate, people still need to be motivated, right?
Yeah.
Engaged. So how can companies create an environment where people are actually excited to come to work, give it their all?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's about more than just salary and benefits. People want to feel valued, respected, appreciated for what they contribute. A culture of recognition, that's key.
So it's not just the paycheck, it's how you're treated. Knowing that your hard work is seen, that you're making a difference. What else can companies do to boost that motivation, that engagement?
Growth and development opportunities are huge. People want to keep learning, keep progressing, expanding their skills. Investing in employee development, it's not just a nice perk. It's like essential if you want to stay ahead of the game.
It's about nurturing that growth mindset, that desire to learn and improve. Sounds like investing in your people is good for everyone, the individual and the company. All right, let's talk about the environmental asset enablers. What are some key things companies should be thinking about here?
Well, technology is a big one. Having the right tools and systems in place can make a world of difference.
But technology changes so fast. It's hard to keep up. How can companies make sure their tech is actually serving them, not the other way around?
It's all about finding that balance, embracing new stuff, but also making sure it actually fits your needs. Just because something's new and shiny doesn't mean it's right for every situation, right?
Right. It's like buying that fancy kitchen gadget that you end up never using because it's too complicated or doesn't really do what you need it to do.
Exactly. You got to be intentional with your choices. And it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how you implement it, how it fits into the workflow.
Oh, absolutely. You can have the best software in the world, but if people don't know how to use it, or if it doesn't integrate well into their daily work, it's useless. It's
Right.
like having a Ferrari, but not knowing how to drive stick shift. Okay, one more thing. The physical workspace.
Yeah.
How can companies design spaces that, promote productivity, collaboration, well-being? Especially now with so many people working remotely or having these flexible arrangements.
Yeah, that's a hot topic these days. A workspace that's comfortable, ergonomic, conducive to both individual work and teamwork that can have a huge impact on people's well-being, their performance.
So it's not just about having a cool office or the latest gadgets. It's about creating an environment that really supports people, how they work. What are some of the things to keep in mind when designing these workspaces?
It's more than just looks. Lighting, noise levels, air quality, even access to natural light, those all play a role. It's about creating a space that reflects the company's values, its culture, and meets the needs of its people.
So if you're trying to encourage creativity, innovation, you might go for a more open, flexible space with areas for brainstorming. And for employees who need to really focus, maybe you offer dedicated quiet spaces, noise-canceling headphones, something like that. It's about having options. This is fascinating stuff, how all these pieces, process, people, the environment, all come together.
Yeah.
Like an orchestra, right? Making sure everything's in sync, playing in harmony.
That's a great way to think about it. It reminds us that process improvement isn't just about tweaking a few things here and there. It's about understanding the whole system and making choices that optimize it.
As we wrap things up here, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will, remember?
The biggest one, there's no magic formula. Every organization is different. Every process is different. You need a solution that fits your specific needs.
It's like having a toolbox. You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw, right? Same with process improvement. Choose the right tool for the job and adapt it as needed.
Exactly. Always be on the lookout for ways to refine things, optimize, and empower your people to do their best work.
It's about seeing challenges as opportunities, never settling for just okay when you can achieve great things. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep learning, keep pushing those boundaries.
And remember, you don't have to go it alone. There are resources out there, communities, experts like myself who are passionate about helping you succeed.
Never underestimate the power of a well-designed process, a motivated team. That's where the real magic happens.
Until next time, keep on diving deep.
And keep those questions coming. We love exploring new topics, helping you uncover those hidden gems of insight.